The battle will be in the ballot box.
Oh, yes?
We're busy sharing the ballot box a little bit.
Okay.
But so far, so good.
I saw you in all white.
All white. Yeah, in Legio Maria. That's a very critical point. Religion is a very critical part of this journey, yeah? So we have to channel all hands on deck.
Okay, all right. Karibu sana.
Asante.
And of course, we're here to talk about, take stock of where we are as a country. The last time I hosted Dr. Rugo, I think we were talking about the state of the economy and how great we were doing at the time, because the economy was projected to grow at over 5%. Of course, the Kenya shilling had appreciated against the dollar to 129. The interest rates were going down. For treasury bills was going sub 8, if that is allowed. But here we are, at a time that the government and the political leaders are on the campaign trail talking about two-term and one-term competing messages. At the same time, the opposition, united opposition is said to be disuniting, conflicting within it. Diana, let me start with you on where you find the country amidst the noise that Dr. Rugo describes. How are we doing?
I think the country, I think there are more people who are reflecting than we actually think. The political noise, both from the politicians who are in power and those who are in opposition, is pointing to everybody knowing there is a deep-seated problem of employment. So that's why the president would stop everything and try to see if he can redeem all his promises through Nyota. It is a reason why the Senate and everybody has been whipped to try and rethink their commitment to devolution. Maybe it is a reason my president of the Law Society of Kenya has finally existed the panel of expert. Mm-hmm. So I do think, and particularly from the economic governance front, where Kenya is thinking, do we need another IMF program? Do we mop up resources from a different place? I am aware that we are listening a bit more attentively to the recommendations of the Auditor General. You have the Gen Zs. We are reflecting, why are the Gen Zs not turning out in high numbers to register as voters compared to how they are supporting other humanistic causes? So I think the country is in... the country is tired, but deeply reflective currently. That's where I would place it.
Okay. And yourself, Joshua, with the advantage of 3 years outside the management of a county when it comes to legislative agenda, how are we?
Okay, thank you very much. I think I would want to pick from where she's mentioned that the country is in a reflective mood. Being in a reflective mood then means it places the country in a mixed zone, whereby we don't talk about the extreme pessimism that was the character of 2023, 2024, but at the same time, you don't get that optimism that maybe was in 2022. So we are in a mixed zone. And why I say so is because of more or less like reality checking in, whereby when you talk about governance, and you've asked very well, governance is a very dynamic space. Governance is a very fluid space that keeps moving. And you have so many moving parts. First thing first is that you have a political class that is struggling to catch up with the expectations and the demands of the people. This began in 2022, when the current regime was pitching for its election. Its pitching was pegged on issues and agenda. And the promise given at that time was vote for Kenya Kwanza on the basis that we will be an issue-based government, and more importantly, we seek to rewrite the wrongs. And the main wrong at that time was more or less like economic mismanagement. But there was a small, maybe I can put it like more or less like a fine print. Governance was also an issue. But economic problems and mismanagement topped the list, so that the current government came with a clear mind. We have to sort out the economy. And you've seen, and I think if you see how the government works very hard on statistics to show what is the difference. And rightfully so, they can be able to show you, for example, how they've been able to check inflation, how they've been able to handle macroeconomics, how they have been particularly been keen to stem the crisis that would have been in terms of debt default. The only difference, the reason why I say we are in a mixed zone is that the same then needs to translate to actual feeling and impact the people. People need to touch, feel this economic change that the current government is riding on. So that if you look at the past 6 months, and that is now post-Gen Z, if you look at the past 6 months per se, the government has, on the economic front, been churning out really positive news in terms of how we are handling the debt, in terms of even, like, for example, last week, you could see how the Treasury was bullish in buying out the Eurobond that was due in 2028. And number two, the ratings getting better. However, the problem is one, very rosy, very good when it comes to the statistics. But now when you just climb down a bit to the real person and the real people, they will see the statistics, they'll pause. I almost kind of equate it with the time of 2022. There was a time when, I think when we were voting in 2022, and there was a voter asked in the queue, how are you seeing this particular exercise? Are the polling agents organized? What do you think? And the only thing he said, it's in amount. He had no opinion. So the same thing applies now. That's why we are in a mix zone. So the government then, you see a pivot towards trying to do something that can reinvigorate the people. When you talk about, for example, the Nyota program, it's a way now to try to lay it over, away from the statistics, to a real thing that people can touch. That's why, for example, programs that you could feel and touch, like Hustler Fund, is not per se on the talking point. Now, Nyota program, I feel, will now take over the space that Hustler program was supposed to do and it has not achieved. Importantly, you find the twin projects, for example, the health, universal health coverage, becomes the single most important program that will dictate how much impact on policy it would be. Quickly then, on issue of devolution, as you mentioned, the missing link, I think, in all this story has been the story of devolution post-2022. If you look at because this is now the third phase of devolution. For me, I feel this is the period where devolution has lost it. The national government has been so much on the face and so much powerful that the devolved system has lost it. My question is, for example...
We'll get to the details of devolution later on. I just wanted us to start by highlighting some of the key concerns that we find in the country. And now that you're already into it, Sheila, of this Nyota, and I'm looking at the website that is communicating about this entire program, which you'll find that... let me just look at what they are describing. So it's outrightly clear that... this is a program being implemented, funded by the World Bank, and it's a 5-year program aimed at transforming the lives of vulnerable youth. And they are saying that over the 5 years, Nyota will create employment opportunities, enhance income generation, and promote savings among the young population. So then the question would be about the rollout itself. He mentioned something about the Hustler Fund, but also if we are firm on an agenda to deal with unemployment in this country, beyond the statistics we will hear about sometimes housing levy and the affordable housing that is going on in the country?
Yeah, I think it's important sometimes to reflect, as we sit on a panel like this, on, I think what you're bringing up is what is Nyota and it's being rolled out. First of all, you rightly pointed out that Nyota is a World Bank program. Kenya is not the only one that has it. There's several developing countries that the World Bank targets to have it. It's not the first time that Kenya is receiving a similar program from the World Bank. The last one was called the Kenya Youth and Opportunity Project, KYEOP. That lapsed in 2023. So this is the World Bank coming back again to intervene. So it's a very well-known World Bank program. The last one was funded to a tune of $150 million. And that is what we're seeing today. I think what is interesting is to see the kind of the oomph that it's being used to roll it out this time around. We saw that yesterday every single PS was back, mashinani, and, really trying to explain. First, it's a good program for youth. Like I've said, it's been done in many other countries before, even in Kenya prior to this. So it does offer opportunities. It's also good that maybe the youth are also sensitized on how many people are going to benefit from this program. And also just to know that it is not a program that will just give you 50,000. That's not a program. It's a program that's supposed to help you develop your skills. It's a program that's supposed to leverage on business opportunities and seed money for the youth. So it's a very holistic program. It's not like the Hustler Fund. I think most youths are thinking that they're going to dial and then apply and then all of a sudden they get 50,000. That is not true. And like I've always been a champion of saying, can we get something that has a bit more thought behind it, something that is figuring out capacity building prior, some kind of screening on the recipients of it and things like that. And because this is a World Bank program, it will include all of that, right? So you're not going to just dial something and then get money into your phone like we did with Hustler Fund. So again, very positive. What we should also ask ourselves is exactly what I think has been mentioned here before is what's the status update with Hustler Fund? What's the status update with so many of the other ones? The empowerment programs that have gone around the country. I'd be curious to have a bit of an assessment of what was the impact of that and should we continue doing that or not? And what are the lessons from it? And if it was good, how do we plan to fund it moving forward? Or how did we even fund it when it happened prior? I think those are some of the questions that we should ask ourselves. But I think it's also a temperature check that we're heading towards election season when you're having a World Bank program that is quite heavily politicized. So yeah, it's quite an exciting time to to be able to see this. And I say this because I've consulted prior with the World Bank when they were rolling out programs similar to, they don't call it Nyota, they customize the names. And there's other countries that it's happened that it's never really too political. I mean, it's the World Bank very heavily brands itself that it is the World Bank doing it. And it's just done like the scholarship programs that you have with USAID and the rest of them. But what we saw yesterday is quite a clear move of, shifting a lot less Hustler Fund and more Nyota programs, so we see how it works. But I think information is key. So it's not going to be where you just get 50,000 because you're a youth somewhere, no.
And now to take advantage of your experience in that consultancy, because, yes, there's Nyota funded by the World Bank, but there's also what you just mentioned about the empowerment program, which is largely political, and the events that we've seen, the politicians will arrive usually in the afternoon, early afternoon, and have a good dance. Then thereafter they'll make a few speeches. I don't know what lessons we can pick so that as we progressively address the challenges of unemployment, reaching the vulnerable, what can we do? Because, yes, politics will always be here, but the youth, it's a transitional period for them.
Right. And I think it's also a national crisis that we're going through, the youth bulge problem. And that's why I've always said, can we be systemic in our interventions? Can we have a clear plan? Can we say, okay, now we're rolling out an empowerment program. And in the empowerment program, we're going to be issuing out X, Y, and Z. What lessons did we learn from it? What was the budget? How do we make this sustainable so that next year we also see similar programs rolling out? And those are some of the answers that they're not quite easy to get. I think because of the nature of the crisis that is the youth unemployment crisis, what could be positive about the Nyota program that is being rolled out is at least because of that supervision or the criteria that is being set out by the World Bank, is that we should see a very different shift than the ones that we've been seeing before, where there is an application program. I saw curiously also that they will be checking your credit score. So if you haven't paid Hustler Fund, you will not be eligible for the Nyota Fund, right? So we are starting to see some glimpse of, systemic kind of programming that is going through. But we have to get lessons from this, because if we are just reactive in trying to cool down youth, then the problem will still be persistent and it becomes even more expensive. For example, there's been very different interventions that have been done in different countries, for example, with the youth blood problem. So I'm always asked, okay, Sheila, you keep saying systemic, give me an example. I'll give you an example. Some countries, for example, have waived the admission fees to higher learning education institutions for youth. Therefore, it was easier for you to just go apply for help, but then you don't have to pay the 6,000 or 5,000 in order to access these institutions. That is systemic because it doesn't matter where you are. As long as you will be qualified, you'll go in and you'll be able to do it. Some have worked, which is, I think Nyota will address this as well, linking up businesses to entrepreneurship so that people can go and get some skills, because for every job you try to get, they ask you, well, do you have experience? So these are systemic interventions and examples of when we say that the problem is so big that you actually have to jump in through the system and try to address it. Nyota will target every single ward. I'm from Migori County. So in Migori County, we have 40 wards. So I think for every single ward, Nyota is supposed to get 70 youth. Right? We have 40 wards. So that's 2,800 youth that will come from Migori. So we have to do more.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about a ward where you come from, and there's 70 of them that qualify for this. So it's a really good start, but then we have to do more. All the other interventions also have to back this up.
Okay. Dr. Rugo, so then, as a country that every year we have the ritual of preparing for the budget and, of course, the finance bill on how to finance a part of that, do you see consistency in thinking and planning, especially to address this unemployment issue? Because when former speaker is saying here that the Hustler Fund is on a phased... Okay, so at the initial stages, phased rollout, so I don't know what you call it on the other end. Do you see directed planning, deliberate planning towards addressing some of these challenges?
Thanks, Sam. In this country, I worry that the people are seen as a means to an end and not the greatest resource. So politicians see them as votes. Out there, in the matatu industry, they are seen as money. In fact, they say beba pesa. And in the hospitals, they are seen as just an income mechanism, schools. And therefore, I worry that sometimes we have not really focused on people as the asset, as the greatest resource this country has, which actually it is, because we don't have major minerals. The things we have actually are the brains of our people. And when you think about the employment question, and there's been a lot that has been written and said about the employment question, you ask yourself, what is the problem? I think the way I see it is that the problem has been consistently not addressing it and hoping, as the young people will say, it a jeeper, it will sort itself, it will take care of itself. How do we say it will take care of itself? We'll just need to establish a hustler fund. I will borrow money, and therefore I will start an entrepreneurship. and yet, the youth bulge is both a curse. It can be both a curse or a blessing. I think there is a possibility to make it a blessing. But then you have to go back and ask yourself, beyond the education system, because there we have quite some work to do, and we had made a lot of progress, and we have to work very hard, very fast, because the numbers are falling back. I think the last time I checked, we have about 1.5 million, 1.3 million children out of school, largely because they cannot afford. And affordability, therefore, means that these are households that do not have income. If you go further, then you will appreciate that these households are likely to be involved in some form of agriculture, but that agriculture does not have a value chain in which it gets itself into business. So they have food. In fact, they say places that have food have no money. The Kikuyus have a very interesting saying about it. Where there is food, there is no money, because everybody has the same kind of food, and therefore they cannot trade with each other. So to your question, I think it's for me, the way I would approach it is to ask what is the problem. And I see three things that honestly need to be addressed if we are to deal with the youth employment problem. The first one, and I will pick from what Sheila has just left at, is the question of why are these young people not able to pay the Hustler Fund? Because doing business in this country is becoming impossible. The regulatory framework, whatever way you look at it, and everything that is around it, the permits you need to take from the county council, from the county governments, from the many sagas that are there, the state agencies that are there, the licenses that you need to pay for, the taxation framework. In fact, for some, regularizing or formalizing your business is the beginning of its end. And why do I say that? 17 million Kenyans are considered to be in the informal sector, of the 20 million that are supposed to be, in employment. In that informal sector, the biggest thing is that they are doing businesses that cannot help them to make ends meet. And a regulatory environment, for me, I think is a big one. The second one is credit. So while the other programs supported by the World Bank, and I have a lot of respect for the World Bank, but I am not convinced that the programs as designed will succeed. The reason being is that, you see, the assumption that everybody is an entrepreneur, I think it's also fallacious. The question of credit to private sector, which basically then creates the expansion, So Hustler Fund, after Hustler Fund, where were you to get the extra money? You go to the bank, you cannot get because you don't have proper collateral. You go to the to the Hustler Fund, you get some money, but it's not sufficient. So credit question, because credit, whether you look, I mean, whichever angle you look at it, will definitely be a big piece. And the last one is just the market, which has to do with circulation of cash. Who is buying these products from these many young people who are going to be producing something, whether it's a service or a product? Because where there's no money circulation, and I talked about it when I was giving the example of how many children are not in school. Yeah. We were given, just an example the other day of a program where basically, the school feeding program, where families are supposed to contribute some amount, and the amount is quite small. But when you think about families that cannot afford it, it's 5 shillings. Cannot afford it, and therefore that child cannot eat because they could not afford it. It tells you, and I don't want to go into the poverty numbers because they give the full story. Yeah. So the question of the fact that there is no, I can produce, Diana can produce, Sheila can produce, Sam can produce, Joshua can produce, every one of us can produce. But if there is no money circulating within the economy, then it means nobody will purchase. And for me, those are the things to address before you try and throw money at all these young people, then land them in the same frustration.
Okay. Okay. And we'll continue with this because at the same time, the government has come up with initiatives or programs, or whatever name you want to assign it. So part of the preaching is about the creative economy, that there are digital hubs across the constituencies, and of course, the controversial number of jobs created under the affordable housing program. The last we heard was about 320,000, or is it 360,000 jobs created with 170 sites or thereabout across the country. We are taking a short break. When I come back, we'll continue the conversation, but also touching on the question of voter registration, devolution, and the politics as the panel sees it. We'll be back in a moment.